Welcome, everyone. This is SharePoint Power Hour. We're glad to see you all here today. SharePoint Power Hour is a live show that we do every Wednesday at 11 Central. I'm Laura Rogers, and this is my team at Rackspace Hosting. And the whole idea behind Power Hour is to talk about business solutions that you can do in SharePoint without necessarily having to be a programmer or be a server admin. We see a lot of content out there that's server admins do this, devs do this, and over the years there's that sort of gray area in between of just people using SharePoint and wanting to use workflows and things like that. There aren't necessarily a dev or an admin. We're addressing that area of all those other things you can do in SharePoint, like BI, workflows, forms, just discussions about user adoption and user interface, and just all kinds of different topics that don't entail being a programmer necessarily. So today's demo is going to be on web part properties. So kind of funny background behind that. The first presentation I ever did at, well, rewind a little bit more. The first chapter that I ever wrote in a SharePoint book was in the MOS Administrator's Companion. That was MOS was SharePoint 2007, and I wrote the chapter on web parts. And then, so the first presentation I ever did at a conference was at the Best Practice Conference in like 2008, I think, and it was on out-of-the-box web parts. So this is kind of going along those same lines, and I still do a presentation at SBTechCon just about every year, I think, on what are all the out-of-the-box web parts. This is a web part settings, so all those little obscure things that you've seen in your web part settings that you weren't necessarily sure what they do or why to use them. I'm going to go over all those, and we're going to take questions as we go. We have a little, so if you're watching us live on YouTube, there's a link to take you over to the Google Hangout. It's a little yellow link that you can click. And once you're there, we actually have a Q&A app that lets us take questions as we go. So that's the fun thing about doing this live, is that you guys can all interact. So we have a Q&A app. They actually added a new app that just appeared in there today. That's the Applause app. I see we have 8 viewers, so see if you guys can find that. Do you have like an applause button that you see in the Google Hangout that you can click? Come on, guys, help me out here. Not that I want everybody clicking it the entire time, but hopefully you guys can find it, or give me some feedback as to if you see it or not. You can use the little Q&A app to respond to me there. I'll wait a few seconds. I think there's a little bit of a delay anyway, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce the whole team, and then I'll get started on my demo. So Tavis, then Joel, then Ryan.
Hello everyone, my name is Tavis Lovell, and I am on the Business Solutions team with Rackspace, and I am primarily a business intelligence developer, so kind of all things to do with data and SharePoint, so things like Performance Point, Power Pivot, Excel services, reporting services, all that good stuff.
Hello guys, I'm Joelle Farley. I am also on the Business Solutions team. I work a lot with the stuff Laura talked about, so a lot of the out-of-the-box features, workflows, in the past a lot of InfoPath, and then also I work with our planning and design, so I help people kind of plan and organize and get ready for whether they're upgrading, migrating, or just using SharePoint for the first time. And I worked with SharePoint for about 6 or 7 years now, full-time. It's a lot of fun.
Hi everybody, I am Ryan Keller. I'm the branding guy on the Business Solutions team. Been doing branding exclusively for about 3.5, 4 years now. So I kind of take what Laura and Joelle and Tavis do and make it not look like the out-of-the-box SharePoint. So that's kind of my role, and it's been fun.
All right. Okay. So again, I'm Laura Rogers, Microsoft VP. I've been using SharePoint for about 10 years, and I'm actually the manager of all these SharePoint consultants, and I get no code. My blog is all about doing things without involving code in SharePoint, so I do a lot of workflows and forms and just custom business solutions. Let's see, we did get one comment in the chat window. Mark says he only sees Q&A and Showcase. So I guess that answers the question about the whole applause thing. I don't know what Showcase is, though. I want to click that and let us know what happens. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so Dan responded a couple of times. There's some new connected dots thing below the video. Interesting. I don't know. Google. That's the thing about using Google Hangouts for this, is they just keep changing it up, and you never know what you're going to find in there from one week to the next. Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you guys can shout it out. I guess my friends in here, shout it out if you see a question come up in there. All right. Let's see. And Taz, does my voice sound like it's choppy or anything? You said that? Made a comment in there. Does anybody else? Does it sound choppy?
On occasion. Right as you were saying that, actually, it was glitching out for me, but it might just be my connection. I don't know.
Okay. I'm actually going to close Skype and other things that I have running just in case. So I do have my VM running. Let's see. Andrew says when you click the dot, you can thumbs up or thumbs down, and when you hit thumbs up, you got cheering and clapping. But we don't hear the cheering and clapping. Okay, that's a little odd. You would think that if they're going to build an applause app, that the people doing the show would be able to hear it. Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, guys, for the input. Okay. You never know. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Just imagine if they had the power to click applause. I mean, we wouldn't even be able to hear you. There'd be so much applause for Laura.
Oh,
No, but it seems like that would be a dangerous thing for people to be able to do something.
That might be a little
loud.
Right? Okay, so I'm going to. Can you guys see my screen now? All right. What I've done here is I've created several demo pages on a SharePoint site, so I can show you what some of the different things look like just on the screen. So I'm going to show you the first setting that I'm going to go over now. Now, in all these demos that I've put in here for today, they're all around list view web parts, because all the different other web parts that aren't just a view of a list or library, all those different functional web parts, they all have completely different settings than each other. But what I'm going over today is all the just sort of settings that go across the board and that are standard to pretty much all the web parts, and the ones that are standard to all the list and library view web parts. So this first thing that I'm showing you is the toolbar type. So it's got full, summary, no toolbar, or show toolbar. And as I'm an edit view versus not an edit view of my page, things are going to look a little different as well. And what I'm using here in these examples are all going to be web part pages, just because basically wiki pages drive me nuts, and web parts randomly just disappear off of them and things like that. So, all right, so full and summary toolbar look the same. All it gives you, it's called a toolbar. It doesn't really look like a toolbar to me, but it gives you this little new document button. And just a little fun fact is when you click it, it gives you the option to upload something. And if it's a list, it's going to say like new item. If you have an InfoPath, a form library with InfoPath forms in it, and people click the new document, it's going to prompt them to upload something. So for an InfoPath form library, you're not going to want to use that setting when you're displaying your forms in a web part, just because it's not going to be very useful. It's just going to confuse people. All right, so show toolbar is going to have a lot more information. It's going to have the ability for you to pick a content type from the new drop-down box, and to upload things, just different items to your library, and then actions, and depending on what kind of permissions that you have on the library, whether you would normally see the settings in the first place, you're going to see the things to be able to create columns and views and things. If you don't have the permissions to be able to do these things in a library, you're not going to see the settings button at all. So if you have an InfoPath form library and you want people to have that button to fill out a new form, this is the new button. This is the toolbar you're going to want to be able to use so that it will actually pull up a new form for them to fill out. And then no toolbar, I like to use this one a lot for web parts because it just allows us to quickly see just the content with no, extra, you're not wasting any real estate here. You're just no toolbar. And then this little checkbox thing you'll see here, it's not part of the web part settings per se, but it's another just thing that I like to tweak sometimes when I'm looking at a list or library. That is actually the tabular view. So in your view settings for that web part, for that view of that list or library, there's a little tabular setting, and you can uncheck the box if you don't want people to be able to select something and be able to do things with it in the ribbon up here, or select multiple things. So like sometimes I'll just have let people link to something to open it up, but not necessarily give them all this other confusion sometimes of what other things they could do with it. All right, so that's the toolbar. Again, shout out questions as you go, and don't worry, I know there's a little bit of a lag, but I can always just jump back if you guys have a question about that. The next set of settings is the Chrome around the web part, and the Chrome is like this frame around the web part. And you'll notice that when you're setting up your web part settings, you're going to see these titles. Like you're going to see these web part titles and the Chrome and everything when you're in the just when you're in this edit mode on your page. So it's going to little bit confusing, because if I choose no Chrome, if I set it to none, why am I still seeing this frame around this web part? So again, the Chrome, I'll show you what the setting looks like. It is over here in my Appearance section. So under Appearance, the Chrome type. So default, none, title and border, title only, and border only. Some other settings we have in here, this is the title. So the title is just what it's going to say at the top of the web part. Of course, if you choose Chrome type none, or if you're not showing the title, it doesn't really matter. But the default is just for it to show the name of whatever that list or library is. And what I like to do usually is to make it a little more specific. So like if I'm putting a web part of tasks on the home page, and I filter that web part to make it show just, the logged in person, their own tasks, like my tasks, I'm actually going to go change the title of the web part as well to make it say my tasks, so people will know what they're looking at when they are looking at that web part. So it's a little bit more descriptive. So it's going to, I kind of like to name this whatever the name of the view is in most cases. Height and width, you can go in here and hard code the height and width to make it a certain, to shrink it or grow it. I usually don't mess with that, because you end up kind of getting in the weeds and wasting a bunch of time trying to make it look a certain way, and it never ends up looking like that, right guys? So I usually
Very true.
Yeah, I usually don't mess with the height and width in here, but you could. Chrome state is the minimized versus normal. So this web part over here I set as minimized, so the whole web part is just shrinks down, and the whole thing's minimized. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this settings screen and show you what some of these look like after I stop editing the page. So we have default. This one is none, so it still shows me the toolbar, but it doesn't show me any kind of frame or web part title. This is title and border. I like this one a lot because it gives you, gives you a little frame around your web part. And then and then title only doesn't have a border, and then border only, of course, is just a border. And this minimize thing, all it is now is just a link straight to that library. So in previous versions of SharePoint, when just regular end users were looking at, a web part on a page, they would actually see and be able to interact with that little, the little web part drop-down box, and you could just interactively minimize web parts just without being in edit mode on the page. Do y'all remember that? Does that ring a bell? So, because when I started messing with this minimize thing, I came to the realization that that was really just an antiquated setting, because that's not really something that you can't click on that anymore. You can't, end users can't minimize and maximize. So I even tried like different permission levels and trying different, different users, and nobody has that little drop down anymore. So, and I even tried it on a couple of different types of pages. So you all kind of agree? Am I going nuts, or is that what you found as well? They're all shaking their heads.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right, so that would be, so that's your Chrome. That's just what it's going to look like, the frame and the title of it. All right, I'm going to go to this, some of the little advanced settings in here. And let's see. So this is my demo on what the little advanced settings look like. So I'll go into the web part settings and show you. And again, these seem to be really applicable to only previous versions of SharePoint because, and I'll show you why. So what I've done in this advanced section is I've unchecked all these boxes. By default, they're all checked. Allow minimize, allow close, allow hide, allow zone change, allow connections, allow editing and personal view. So allow minimize, that's that little minimize thing that I showed you where the whole web part itself was minimized. So that would mean that end users would have the ability to click the corner of the web part and minimize it. Of course, they don't have the ability anymore anyway, so that one's not applicable. Allow close is going to allow them to, it's going to give them, see this close button versus the delete button. When you close a web part, it's actually still on the page, and it's still, when the page loads, it's still one of the things that loads on the page. So in this case, it's, you know, on a web part page, it allows you to close or delete. On a wiki page, it only gives you the ability to delete it, so that's good, because I've seen a lot of cases where people have closed a web part, and I'm going to go ahead and close this one, and then they'll have like 50 different closed web parts on a page and not realize it, because over the years, as they edited that page and added and removed web parts, they thought they were removing web parts off of a page, but they closed them and didn't delete them, so they weren't gone. So over the years, it takes longer and longer and longer for that page to load because all those web parts are really still there and just invisible. So that's what you aren't, the people that are going to be editing web part pages in SharePoint, you just, mostly it's a training issue to teach them when you're adding and removing web parts to just use the delete and not the close. But if you uncheck that, see, they don't have the ability to close it. They can only delete it. But the thing about all these settings here is that if you can get to the web part settings in the first place, you can just go check all the boxes back. So since this doesn't apply to end users anymore, it really only applies to the other people that are editing the web part page, right? So if they really wanted to go do some of these things, all they'd have to do is go into the settings and go check the box back. So allow hide is just allows them to hide the entire web part, which is going to be a setting. See, in the layout, they don't, the allow, the checkbox to allow to hide the whole web part is gone. Zone change. These different sections here, like left column, middle column, and right column, those are zones. So if I don't allow them zone change, I'm not allowing this web part to be moved back and forth between the different zones on the page. And then allow connections, that's web part connections. Allow them to connect to each other. And then allow editing in personal view, that is going to be, again, it applies to older versions of SharePoint because end users had the ability to go to just any web part page in SharePoint and click like Site Actions up there and actually edit their own personal view of that page. Do y'all remember that? Does that ring a bell? That seems to be gone now, though. I couldn't find it anywhere. So that's what that applies to. So if those of you who are watching, if you're using older versions, 2007 or 2010, I don't even know if it still existed in 2010. I know it was there in 2007. That's what that's going to allow you to do is, control what the end users can do when they're interacting with it. So I'll go ahead and show you if you've closed a web part, how will I know, how will I get it back, and how will I know if I have a page that's full of a bunch of closed web parts. When I click Add a Web Part, look at this. I've got a little section down here called Closed Parts. So if you find a page in your environment that's loading really slowly and you're troubleshooting it, that's where it might be. So I'll go click to add that, and when, of course, I can pick which zone I want to add it to as I'm adding it back. And now it's going to put my web part back where I had it. All right, so I'm going to go into the settings of this other one that's got the allow. See, now I've got all these other things I can do. I can add connections. And this other one where I unchecked all the boxes, it's very limited as to what I can do. I'm going to go into this part, this web part, and show you some of the settings around layout while I'm in here. So that was the advanced settings with all the different checkboxes of things that you can allow and not allow. And now, I didn't do a fancy PowerPoint presentation like Tavis sometimes does, but this is sort of the next segment would be to go into the layout stuff. This is where you can hide a web part. So if you're just testing something and trying it out and you don't necessarily want people to see it yet, you can check the hidden box, and that way the web part will still be on the page, but it'll just be hidden. So when you get out of edit mode, now the web part's not there anymore and users aren't going to see it, but then when you're in edit mode, it's going to say it's hidden in parentheses. So you'll remember that you hid it. And that's different than closing it, obviously. When you close it, it looks like it's completely gone to everybody. All right, direction. I actually did a whole other little page on that, so I'll go show you that in a second. But the zone here, so if I'm having problems, a lot of times I use this zone thing, these two zone settings, if I'm having problems dragging a web part around on the page. Like maybe if I have a really long web part that's got a ton of things in it and I can't, like, if I have one below it that I'm trying to drag to the top and I can't quite get it, get around on the page to drag it from zone to zone, you can always just go to this little layout section in your web part settings and then just change it that way, so that you don't have to, it's just your alternate to dragging things. On wiki pages, like, the default home page in 2010 and 2013, you don't have the ability to change zones and web parts. You have to either delete it and add it somewhere else or drag it around, and dragging around is extremely clunky. And have y'all noticed that in wiki pages? It's almost impossible to do. So this is my alternate to dragging it, is to go into the layout and change what zone it's going to show in. And then the zone index is going to be what order the web parts show inside of that zone. So I'll go to my zone. I'm going to change this. So this is a left column zone over here. I'm going to change this one from footer to left column. And then if I leave it on 0, it's going to put it on top of the one that's already there. So I'll change it to 1. Again, you guys who are watching, just shout it out in the Q&A if you have questions as we're going. So now this one up here is 0, and then this is 1, and they're in the correct order. All right, and I'm going to go flip over to a web part page real quick and show you what the difference is with that particular setting. So I'm going to go, this is my home page. I'm going to go edit the page and go edit a web part setting. All right, and then layout. See, I've got zone, it's still there, but it's just grayed out. Like the box to hit to hide something is grayed out, and the zone, you can't click on them, you can't do anything with the zones. So if I try to drag something, it's really kind of difficult to get it to, like, I'm dragging and letting go and it's not going where I want it. I found that if I put my cursor over in the place where I want it and then drag it, sometimes, there it worked. So it's a little bit easier if you do that. So click the cursor over there first, and then you'll have a dent, and sometimes it takes a few tries, and then you'll have a spot to drag it around. So again, wiki pages are a little more clunky than web part pages to deal with. I like that setting that you have in your site features. I'll show you real quick. It's called wiki page home page. And by default, this is activated on all your team sites, but you can deactivate that. If you just want your home page to be a regular web part page like you might be used to, you can deactivate that, and then your home page will be a web part page. Of course, you'd have to start all over because it's going to give you an empty web part page, but then you wouldn't have to deal with all the randomness and web parts disappearing that happens on a wiki page, right? All right, so let me go back to my demo. Now I'm still going to be in the layout area, but this is the left to right setting. So I have left to right over here, and I have right to left over here. So that was in the layouts where you had a drop-down box that said left to right or right to left. And from what I understand, that's going to be more of a setting that's pertinent to different languages needing to go left to right. I have a link, a hyperlink I'm going to share with you guys, but I'm opening Outlook right now, so hopefully let me know if I'm getting too choppy. I don't know why I left it in Outlook, but I have a link I want to share with you guys that's actually got the information about all the web part settings, just an informational page that I found on Microsoft's site that just kind of lists them all out. So I'll go ahead and put that in our little link sharing app that we have in here. And okay, it usually takes a second for it to load because it actually loads the page and loads the link and makes it look all pretty. Okay, now show item. Okay, so you guys should see now in our little, it's the Showcase app. It's the one that allows us to share links. You guys ought to see the link in there to be able to. It's called Use the List View Web Part, and it's just on Microsoft's Office site to be able to go read all those different settings and what they do. So I'll just show you real quick what that looks like if you guys are maybe watching later on YouTube and you can't find it. So that's what the page looks like. So it's just got a whole big long list of what all these settings are here, and a lot more information about web part connections and all kinds of stuff. All right. So that's where I read about the right to left and the whole purpose of right to left and left to right. All right, so some of the next setting I'm going to go over is some of those little mysterious help settings in here. Has anybody used those before and or seen those and wondered what the heck they were? All right, the help setting. So we've got the icon to be able to configure, and we've got a help setting. Now, the purpose of the help setting, it looks like it's also one of those antiquated features that is only going to be available, useful in previous versions, because again, end users don't have interaction with that. Maybe Ryan, as a branding person, maybe this help setting, see that shows up right here, maybe that's something that using branding you could somehow make it display in the top of the web part to actually be useful for end users. But probably. The way it is now, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, we have to look into that, but yeah, you might be able to do something like that.
So the purpose of the help setting is for people to be able to say, I don't know what this web part here is. I don't know what this is supposed to mean to me, this list of tasks or list of documents or whatever. And they could click a help button and find out more information. It brings up a pop-up window, and it brings up an informational page for them about whatever that thing is on the page in the web part. So this is just, I just typed some text on a page, and so this is my little test help file. So I'll show you how to do that. All right, so I'll go in and edit the web part, and I'll show you a couple things in here. All right, so I'm just going to go through these down the row, and then I'll get to the help one. All right, the title URL. This is one I actually do edit a lot. So the title URL, that's just where is it going to take someone if they click on the title of that web part. Now, of course, if you use your Chrome settings to get rid of the title of the web part and make it so it doesn't show, then that doesn't really make a difference. But by default, this link is going to take them to that list or library that you're showing in the web part. A lot of the times, maybe you don't want them to go there. Maybe you have like a very specific business solution that you've created where you want them to see this on a web page, a web part page, and you don't necessarily want them going to the list. You don't want them clicking around in there, creating views and doing all the things. You just want them to see that one specific set of information that they see in the web part that you're showing them. So what I do here is if you clear it out and click OK, that doesn't work. It will just put the link back in there. But if you put a # in there, that is what will make it so that it doesn't take them anywhere when they click on it. So it just basically, the # would just refresh that same page. So see, I just keep clicking on it. It looks like a link, but it doesn't go anywhere. Too bad we can't hear the applause app, because I'm sure we're getting like a ton of it right now. Okay, so the next setting in here, you guys shout it out in the Q&A if you think that that's awesome, because I think that's one of my favorite things that I do when I'm building custom business solutions. Here's your description. So when end users are hovering over that web part title, see, I wrote these are operations policies. It's the hover text. So that way, it's another way of just giving end users more information about what's in that web part. And a lot of this stuff that you're seeing here is going to be used more for like custom business solutions. Like I said, you're not going to use this stuff like all over the place in just regular collaboration sites and go crazy doing all these tiny little settings everywhere. It's going to be more for, you know, custom business solutions like a new like that new hire system that we created a few weeks ago, or like you know, any other, you know, travel policy request or request forms, or, you know, Contoso forms, or whatever it happens to be. More custom stuff. Stacy says, is there a way to hide the voting thing? It makes the video way too small and there's no full screen button for the video. Are you talking about in this Google Hangout? I don't know. It's a brand new feature. I think it might be something that we could turn off. Maybe one of you guys can click around in there and see if you can see if it's an app that we can turn off, but I'm not sure. Sorry, Stacy. That's very awkward. Yeah, it's just a new thing that just appeared there today, so I'm not sure. All right. So kind of next thing down the line, so the description is just a helpful description of that web part. The help URL. So the help URL is the link that they're going to go to when they click this drop-down box and click the help button. Again, probably antiquated, but maybe, again, maybe something that can be made useful using branding or something. But when you put a URL in here, it actually puts this little help button in here. So what I did was I went into, now I don't know how much you guys want to know, go deep into this because it's not very useful, but so I'll just tell you real quick, and you just shout out in the Q&A if you want to see how I did it. I went into SharePoint Designer, into my Site Pages library, and I clicked to create a new, yes, Stacy, and I clicked to create a new just blank ASPX page. So it's not even, you know, it's not even a web part page. It doesn't have the branding or the navigation or anything on it. And I just called it help test, and I just typed some text in it. And that was my help text. So back in previous versions of SharePoint, you could, let me go back to my screen here. In previous versions of SharePoint, you could actually point it to an HTML file, but now when you try to do an HTML file in there these days, it actually prompts you to download the file, which is not very useful. So I went into Site Pages. I called it Help Test here, and what I did was I just created a new ASPX page like this, and then of course in SharePoint Designer 2013 you get no visual interface, but what I did was I just went in here, yeah, that's fine, and I just found the body of the thing, and I just typed blah blah blah, and I just saved it. So that's how I just typed just straight up text on just a plain old page like that with no branding or anything around it. And yeah. Help mode. Modeless, it used to give you the ability to make it'd be a modal pop-up box versus navigating you to a completely new page. Now, apparently in 2013, it doesn't matter what you pick in here because it's always going to be the exact same thing. It's going to pop up like I showed you when I demoed it a second ago. Catalog icon image URL is just the image of whatever that list or library is, and I'll show you what that looks like over here. And see, it's just this little document image, but that image doesn't show anywhere in the actual web part, so I'm not sure, well, you know, what that matters. It might be another one of those antiquated things. You guys let me know if you know any different. All right, this one's a great one. Title icon image URL, and it is not antiquated. It actually works. So here's what I did. I'm going to go ahead and stop editing and show you where I went. I went to my my top level of my whole site collection here in my VM, and I have a library, just the out-of-the-box library called Site Collection Images, and that's where I like to just dump all these random images that I use in all my different demos and web parts and things like that. So your image has to be 16 by 16. So I have this one that I use that's 16 by 16 image, so it's a tiny little image, but it looks like a little star. and I grab the link to that. So I just copy the shortcut to it, and then I go back over to my operations page, and I go to the web part where I want to show it, and you see that's where I'm seeing it. But I went into the web part settings, and Todd, I see your question. I'll get to that in 1 second. And then I pasted that link in here. So you can make it a relative URL. I just took like the rtm.contoso.com off the front of it. But oops, I'm sorry, it's down here. Title icon image URL. So that's all I did is I put the link to that image in the title icon image URL, and now it shows this pretty little link in the top left corner where by default would have shown that little, like the little document library icon that's out of the box. So that's a nice one also. That's a nice touch to do for your custom business solutions, to be able to have everything like sort of look a little bit custom and professional and kind of customized on the page to have your own little pretty icons at the corner of every web part. All right, Todd says, so any ASPX designer should work by dropping it into a library and pointing to it. Any ASPX any ASPX page, you could, just point to it. Even if it's, see, the thing is, the reason I did just a plain one without any navigation is just because when it pops up, it looks really silly if it's just like a whole other copy of your web page with the navigation and everything in it, because then it just looks confusing. So I just wanted it to be plain white with no, like I didn't want it to look like a whole new version of my site. So that's why I used a plain one. But yeah, this could just be any ASPX page. This could be any web part page or anything that you're pointing to. But they'd have to be able to go into Edit Web Part and click the drop down and click the Help button to be able to get to that in the first place, which is kind of makes it useless. So there's so many settings in there, and looks like half of them are just residual from previous versions of SharePoint. All right, so target audiences. Yeah, Todd, that's what I was talking about for the help file, the ASPX page. Yeah, but it's still, you have to be in edit mode to be able to click the help button just out of the box. I love this target audiences setting. This is only for the enterprise version of SharePoint, but it lets you pick a target audience for that web part. So right now, I'm logged into this site as me, and I happen to be in the information technology department. But I'm going to go over to another browser, and I'm going to log into it as someone else, and I'll show you what it would look like for them. Let me see. All right, so now I'm logged in as Jennifer Mason. Jennifer Mason in my virtual environment is not in the information technology group, so she doesn't see anything. She doesn't see that web part. That's the only web part on the page, so she doesn't see it. So that's one of those settings that's really helpful to be able to have like specific content on a page for a specific group of people. So, and if they're not in that audience, the web part simply doesn't show. When you're picking a target audience, you have several different types of audiences you can pick from. So global audiences are going to be ones that I've created in Central Admin, in my user profiles and properties, in my audiences setting there. So audiences are something that you can define globally if you want to say, like, if anybody in the company that has the word IT in their job title or has information technology in their department name, those are sort of like rules that you can use to create audiences. So it can be a global audience. It can just be a like an Active Directory group. So I think I have one called Marketing. Yeah. So there's my Marketing Active Directory group. Or it can be a SharePoint group. So I can say, I think I have one called Project Managers or something. So it lets you pick from SharePoint groups. So there are 3 different types of things that you can pick from when it comes to picking an audience to show that web part to. So that's one of the other ones that I think is extremely useful setting, good to know. Import error message, I have never ever edited that, but it's just basically like whoever does that, right? If you're importing the web part and it gives you an error, that's what the message would say. All right, so we've got some more settings in here that I'm going, let's see, I think I might have created, yep, I created a whole other, pretty sure I created a whole other page for the Ajax stuff. Where did I put that? How miscellaneous, yeah, there it is. All right. Ajax is basically lets you define the refresh of the web part. So I just named this web part Ajax. I'm using, you know, this operations policies library for every single web part, but I named this one Ajax to show you this setting. So this is the setting that I enabled to allow manual refresh. So if someone's over in another, you know, some other user is editing, you know, the items in this library or something like that, then you could you just click this little refresh button and it would just refresh that one little web part to be able to see what the edits were that that person made. So I'll go ahead, I'm logged into this other browser, I'm logged in as Jennifer Mason. So I'm going to go in here and edit, let's see, edit one of these policies real quick. I'm just going to go edit the properties, and then I'll go, oh wait, she doesn't have edit permission. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So basically somebody would be editing something, and then when you click refresh, it would show the new modified date and the new, you know, person's name who had just modified it, and you don't have to refresh the whole page. All right, so I'll go ahead and show you some of those properties. And you guys, Joelle, anybody else, I know that I'm just like continuously talking, but please chime in, interrupt me if you guys have any input or any other fun ways of using these things. All right, so enable, when you check all 4 of these boxes and click OK, basically it is automatically going to uncheck the enable asynchronous load. And I know that back in 2010 you actually could do asynchronous load. It just you couldn't do it in conjunction with some of the other settings in here. So it had to, you know, if you checked one, you'd have to uncheck the other one. But I couldn't, no matter what I do in here in 2013, basically that looks like that asynchronous load keeps unchecking itself. See, no matter what I do. So what that is, if you guys are on 2013, is it will load that web part separately from all the other web parts. So if this web part like maybe has a lot of information in it or something like that, like it typically takes longer to load, instead of slowing down the whole page and making the whole page wait, it will actually load all the other web parts on the page, and then this web part would show like a little green, like sort of like a little green refresh icon that looks like it's waiting, you know, just for a couple of seconds until it loads. So it loads separately from all the other web parts. So this manual refresh is what is going to make it show that little button that I showed you at the top right a second ago. There it is. And then the asynchronous automatic refresh lets you define an interval. So I even tested this yesterday. I just set it to 60 seconds, and then I went into another browser and edited something as another user and just sat on this page and waited. And my web part automatically just appeared with the changes that person had made after 60 seconds. So that was pretty cool. So that way you don't have to worry about people, if they're always just working on the same page and they need to see up-to-date information and they're expecting it to be up-to-date, you can set that to automatic. Just kind of keep in mind that that is a performance thing, like it's hitting the server every time and it's hitting the network every time that it's refreshing that stuff. So don't just do it arbitrarily for no reason. Any comments or questions about those settings or anywhere anybody's used them? No? Okay. I'll go ahead, and this miscellaneous stuff is actually pretty fun. I need to write a blog post about this because the miscellaneous stuff, some of this is brand new to 2013. So I don't think I created, yeah, so this is my miscellaneous. All right, so in my miscellaneous web part settings, I went ahead and checked these boxes. I'm going to go down to some of these new ones for the 2013 stuff first. Okay, by default, you have disable view selector menu, disable save this view are both checked by default. and display search box is unchecked by default. So I went ahead and flipped these all to the reverse of what the defaults were, basically. And these are only going to show on, these are on list view web parts in 2013. This is pretty awesome. I'm very excited about these settings. I'm going to get out of edit mode here. So now when I have the, I'm displaying the view picker, basically, it lets me, so I'm in a web part on a web part page, and I get to pick, I get to flip between views. So that's not, now it's going to take me all the way, it's going to take me to that library and flip me to that other view. So it's not just kind of leaving me on the web part page, but at least it gives users an interaction with the fact that there are different views that they could switch between, right? So they can click a view and it would take them over to that library to whatever that view is. This find a file is huge because by default, it's not there, but this lets me quickly go find, just do a little filter. That's weird. I typed it over here and it filtered this other one because both of these web parts are showing the exact same library, so it must be confused. So I typed jury duty and it filtered this other one. Note to self. I'm going to get rid of that other web part and see if that makes a difference. You never know what you're going to find with SharePoint from day to day, right? Mark says, on 2010, the bad thing about the refresh is that if someone is working on the page but hasn't made a save, the refresh will clear everything they changed. So is that, Mark, is that they're working on, like, in a data sheet view or something like that? Like, are they working, like they have a list item open and they're editing a list item? Or what exactly are they doing? They hit edit properties maybe on an item. I'm kind of curious about what exactly they're clicking on for that to happen, because that's a great point. So just let me know. All right, so I'm going to try this again. All right, so I'm going to type a different risk. Yeah, there it is. So jury, and it's letting me know, of course, that some files aren't showing here, and I can say maybe the word test in here. So even fields necessary that might be hidden inside of one of these documents, it's just using SharePoint Search. So it doesn't have to be, values, search values that you see right here. It could be something that's just buried inside of one of those files, just like any SharePoint search. Does that make sense? So I love this new search box in 2013 that shows at the top of all your libraries, and that's how you can get it to show in a web part. It's huge. Wesley says it would be great if you haven't done so yet to do a demo from your blog article called InfoPath Query Specific SharePoint List Data. Well, yeah, we could do a different Power Hour about that. I can add that to my list of Power. We have a little just kind of running list that me and the other team, the rest of the team, keep for Power Hour ideas and stuff that people suggest, and I'll go ahead and add that to it. All right, so let's see what else. Okay, so that's what, now this other setting would be the Save This View button. Have you guys seen this in 2013? This is pretty cool. So anytime I'm just in a library and I'm sorting and filtering columns, and I'm just, clicking around, and I'm going to say modified by a certain person, and I'm sorting it by a date. As soon as you start clicking around in that view and sorting and filtering things, you get this new button that appears that's called Save This View. This is awesome, because before, if you wanted to do that, you would just have to go start all over and click Create a New View, and then try to remember what all your settings were that you were sorting and filtering by. This lets you do it live and then just quickly click a button. So I'm going to say, give a little descriptive name to it, by modified by Laura. And I can make it a public view or a personal view. So of course, if you don't have the permission to create public view, you're not going to have that option, but I'll go ahead and save that. So now that's actually a new view in my list, and it actually takes me to the list when I do that. But at least now it exists. So I'll go back over to my demo. It was my demo miscellaneous. Yeah. So that was so that's the Save This View button. So just by default in a web part of your list or library, that button doesn't show. So if you want end users to be able to interact with that and save the view they're on, you can do that. This is also really useful for, think about all the times that you have placed a web part like on your home page or something, and then you clicked customize this view and you did a whole bunch of tweaking and you put some filters in it and you did a bunch of, custom sorting and grouping and all this stuff, and then those settings only existed in that web part on that home page. And then if you ever wanted to replicate it, you would have to go to your view settings and just print that out or something to remember what you had done, because that doesn't actually exist as a view in your list, right? So now when you're working on a web part view and you get it looking the way you want it to look, and you say, well, I want to take this view and now I want to either take this web part and go put one just like it on another page, or I want to remember this setting for later, you can just go save this view and say, call it web part or something like that, and be able to save those settings you just did in that web part. Mark says, Mark follow-up, : I'm not sure. So I think, Mark, that you're answering my question to you about what they were doing when the view timed out and the users lost their settings, but all you wrote was Mark follow-up, so I don't understand what you're referring to. Sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay, he typed it full. Refresh will clear checked items in a list if the refresh activates before an action can be taken on those items. So in a long list, that can be an issue. If you have 40 items you want to delete in a list of 100 and you've got 47 of them checked. Oh, okay. So, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, in general, just be careful when you're using that setting for the auto refresh, and keep in mind large lists and what people might be needing to do with them. Great point. All right. All right, so those are some of those new, I keep saying new with 2013 and Office 365 stuff, but it's not as new anymore. It's been a couple of years, but it's a new setting. So so that's over here again in Miscellaneous. Does anybody know, I'm not sure what the server render setting is. I didn't really get a chance to look into that one to see what that one does. It's probably listed on this descriptive website I sent you, but I'm not sure what that one does. Anybody have a gander? Tavis, Joelle? Server render? What'd that do? No? Nope. I'm getting shrugs, so they don't know either.
Yeah, I haven't used that before.
Okay. And that's a new one, so that's just, again, 2013 and Office 365. Disable View Selector menu, disable Save This View, and Display Search Box. Those are the ones that I just demoed for you. I undisabled them. This send first row to connected web parts when page loads. It's always checked by default, but it can be useful if you specifically, if you are doing web part connections on that page, and you somebody's clicking one thing in a list and it's automatically filtering things in another list. By default, it's automatically going to select the first thing in that web part and send that filter item information to the other web part. Well, if you don't want it to do that, you can go into your settings here and uncheck the box. That way it would wait for someone to select something first before it starts sending the filter value to another web part. So that's another useful one in more custom business solutions. It's got a default cache timeout. I've never edited that one though. Sample data and XSL link. XSL link is going to be if you have custom XSL that you've written, and I'm not a dev, so I've never written XSL. But what you could do is you could have this custom XSL in a .xsl file and just in a library somewhere on your site. And if you have a bunch of different libraries that you're showing, or the same library which you're showing in many places, and you want them to display in a custom way with certain set of columns and a certain way those columns look and maybe certain formatting, you can create this XSL file one time and then be able to just put the URL to that XSL file here in the setting, and that way whatever those settings were that you already defined would be applied to your web part, and you wouldn't have to go do all that work in multiple places. So there are a lot of blog posts out there where people kind of show how to do that and what XSL looks like. I've just never done it, but I could see how that could be useful. JS link. This is a really, really cool new one. I have just recently fallen in love with this one. This one I actually demoed it in our last Power Hour, or the one that we were talking about, the project site roll-up. This uses JavaScript. So what you do is you create a custom JavaScript file where you would define a certain way that you want, and I'm not a developer, so hold on a second before you start yelling. You define a certain way that you want these items to look in your list. And this is a great way, now that we don't have SharePoint Designer Design View anymore, to be able to do some fairly simple conditional formatting in on a view of a list or library, just in a web part. So I'll show you the one I demoed the other day. I did the little project roll up and roll down stuff, and it was the project. Oh wait, I gotta go to my home page here. So this is more of a developer concept, but I'm in the middle of writing a blog post that would kind of, I'm trying to translate it to be so that it makes more sense to more like non-developers like me. Okay, so I'll show you what it could make just a simple list look like, and it's this second web part down here. It's this web part called projects right here. So this is just a list view web part of a list of projects, and this is a field. It's just a choice field called, budget, health, scope, and staffing. 4 different just plain old choice fields. And in those choice fields, there are just 3 choices: red, yellow, and green. And it's just the word red, yellow, and green. So what they've done with this JS link is they've created this custom JavaScript that will make it so that it shows an image. So just like I showed you with that little icon image for my web part a minute ago, where I just went into my site collection images library and just put them in there, you can make it so that it points to an image, just the URL to an image in SharePoint, and it's really just using conditional formatting rules to show the correct thing according to the correct value. So what I did is I attempted to replicate this, and again, this is something that we need to have a whole other power hour about, because it's me trying to figure out programming where I'm not a programmer. But what I did is I created this one using the same concepts called patient list, and I have this patient list to where I have these patients in a hospital, and the progress field is just the word good or the word bad, and I used the same concept that he did in his in this blog post that I shared in the last Power Hour, to just make it show a certain icon according to a certain condition. And what I was going to try next was just play around with making it, instead of showing an icon, making it show text a certain color, making it show background a certain color, making it show bold, and things like that. So Wes Preston has actually got a great blog where he's got a ton of blog posts about this. So I'm going to go ahead and put his blog. I'm going to share that in the chat window in case any of you are developers and are interested in sort of taking that and running with it and figuring this stuff out. I'll go ahead and share his link with you. He's another MVP. Let's see, so show item. All right, I think it's showing. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so it just says welcome page there in the little showcase app where it lets us share links. So that's his blog site, and JS link is where you would is the kind of the keyword that we use to look up how to do this stuff. So again, it's JavaScript, but as far as programming languages go, it's not too complicated. So all you do is you have to put your JavaScript file in a certain location, and again, we have to do a whole other power hour on this, but you would point it to that JavaScript file, and then it would render that web part and make it look however you define for your conditional formatting. Pretty cool? All right, so I guess we got to wrap it up. I don't see any other questions. Next week, we're doing, what the heck are we doing next week? Anybody know off the top of your head? Let me see. We are, I know that I'm going to be at SP TechCon next week.
I can show, I was going to say that I would show the workflow we talked about last week, the week before, with creating a subsite. So I can do that next week. It may not be a full hour, but it will. We can also just answer some questions. So if you want to make next week a Q&A session, feel free to bring some questions, and we'll take some time just for that.
Okay, so quick recap on what that was. Workflow.
It's a workflow that will allow you to create a subsite with some different details. So it's a SharePoint 2013 workflow that uses the HTTP web service action or calling a web service action to create a subsite.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Joelle. We're looking forward to that, and I'll be at SP TechCon. I think I'm actually in the middle of a session when we have Power Hour, so I won't be able to join. But see everybody next time, and thanks for coming. Over and out.